Welcome back. You're watching Global Eye. The midterm elections in the United States are being watched closely. They are, in a way, a referendum on the incumbent president's performance. This time, Democrats have performed better than expected, and Republicans are likely to take control of the House of Representatives with a thin majority. This could still lead to a showdown between Republicans and Democrats on key policy matters. This election also has a bearing on who could be running for 2024 presidential elections. Biden has said he intends to run for re-election. Donald Trump has also hinted at a potential candidature for 2024. We're now joined by Arun Singh, former Indian ambassador to the United States. Ambassador Singh, thank you for joining us. The Democrats have performed better than expected. Will there be greater scrutiny of Joe Biden's policy agenda in the remaining part of his term still?
There's bound to be greater scrutiny because according to the present trends, although final results are still awaited, although the Republicans have done not as well as was predicted earlier or as had come out from the polling data, they are still likely to get the majority in the House of Representatives. Although in the Senate, it seems that the Democrat may be able to keep their majority. So if the Republicans get the majority in the House of Representatives, they will try and stall the president's legislative agenda. Even when the Democrats were in the majority, and some very important legislation was passed, the Inflation Reduction Act, the CHIPS Act to support semiconductor manufacturing in the US, the infrastructure bill. The Republicans, by and large, did not vote for those measures. Not because they didn't think it was useful, but in the deeply polarized US politics. And when President Trump had continued to dominate the Republican Party, they didn't want to be seen to be associated in any way with the Democratic Party or the agenda that President Biden was bringing to the legislation. So given that, if they get the majority, what is more likely is that they will try and show that President Biden is not being effective in the legislative process. They will try and stall the administration by holding hearings, by doing investigation. There is even talk of doing a pro forma impeachment. So all that will happen. But I think the Democrats also have an opportunity because as a result of these elections, if they don't have the majority, the progressive wing of the Democratic Party will be seen as somewhat weakened in terms of the demands it can bring for legislation. So it may give more of an opportunity for moderate Republicans, moderate Democrats to work together. If that happens, I think that might help the president.
All right. So who could be the Republican candidate, Ambassador Singh, for 2024 now?
So far, President Trump had continued to dominate the Republican Party. Many people who had taken steps against him, supported either his impeachment or had criticized him, opted out of the race or lost in the elections, in the primaries that were held earlier for the Republican Party. So it was expected that Trump may emerge as the unchallenged Republican candidate for the president in 2024. And there was an indication that he may make an announcement as early as November 15. But that now has been pushed, it seems, to next year, partly for legal reasons, but also because the Trump-endorsed candidates did not do very well in the main elections that took place on November 8. So I think there is a sense now that the electorate is moving away from some of the postures, the antics that President Trump had adopted, and the more moderate Republicans are stepping up and have managed to get some support. The Florida governor, Ron DeSantis, who many would not really categorized as a moderate Republican, but he has taken an anti-Trump position. He did very well. The former Vice President Mike Pence, his book is likely to be released in November, this month itself. Some extracts have come out, and he's tried to show himself as a person of character, somebody who stood up to President Trump on January 6th. So I think challenges will now appear to President Trump in the Republican primaries for the Republican nominee.
And I would also like to ask you about the rise of Indian Americans in US politics. We have seen a number of them winning the state contests.
So it's a trend that has been evolving. The earlier generation that went from India largely focused on stabilizing themselves, focused on creating economic opportunity. But I would say for the last 10, 15 years or more, they have become more active in US politics as they integrate more in US society. And I was assigned to the US during the days also of the Obama presidency. And I could see at that time more and more Indian Americans becoming key personnel in the administration, staffers on the Hill. Till 2013, for example, historically, we had a total of 3 Indian Americans who had ever served in US Congress. And from that time, we've continuously had 5 Indian Americans in US Congress being re-elected through various cycles. At this time, the number is going to go up to 6. So one more person has entered the US Congress. And at the local level also, more and more people are contesting the elections. And you'd have seen that one Indian American candidate has just been elected the Lieutenant Governor of Maryland State. So they are certainly taking key positions. But then, if you look at the economy and technology sector, many of the CEOs of leading US companies are persons of Indian origin. So I think there is now more and more integration of Indian Americans in US society, in economy, in the technology sector, and also in politics.
And my final question, Ambassador Singh, next week the Prime Minister, Narendra Modi, he will be heading to the G20 summit in Bali. There could be a possible meeting with President Joe Biden. What do you think will be the focus of discussions from the Indian side?
One is to keep taking the bilateral relationship forward in different areas. You may have seen that when President Biden and Prime Minister Modi had met in May in Tokyo on the margins of the Quad Summit then, they had issued a joint statement, a bilateral joint statement also, where there was a specific provision for the two setting up a structure between their national security councils to start a process of cooperation on critical and emerging technologies. And that's something that will create new areas of cooperation, artificial intelligence, quantum, 6G, cyber, space, semiconductors. So that will certainly be one area. And I'm sure they would want to talk about what's happening in the global situation. There's so much flux in terms of great power competition between US and China, US and Russia. On Russia, India has some differences from the US position. On China, there's a convergence in terms of India also having adversarial aspects in its relationship with China. And of course, they would also look at the global economic situation because G20, as you know, focuses largely on the economy, the financial situation. And global economy, according to what most people say, is headed towards a recession in 2023. So what does that mean? How do you deal with it? How do you build partnerships? People are now talking of more and more building secure supply chains, friend-shoring of production. So in reordered supply chain that is being worked upon, what is the kind of partnership India and US will build? So I think these would be important areas to discuss.
All right, Ambassador Singh, thank you very much for joining us. Putting the US midterm elections in perspective for our viewers. Yes, they will have a lot of impact for US foreign policy, for President's legislative agenda, but little impact on the India-US partnership. There is bipartisan consensus, and this relationship will only grow stronger. Ambassador Singh, thanks once again for being with us on CNBC TV18. With that, it's a wrap on this edition of Global Eye. But don't go anywhere. News continues on CNBC TV18.